Karen chainsawed through my fence at 7:15 a.m. because walking to the mailbox took her an extra 30 seconds. Yeah, you heard that right. A grown woman with a designer tracksuit and a coffee mug going full Texas Chainsaw Massacre on my cedar fence, like she was in a suburban fever dream. I bought her entire property and turned it into a dog park just to prove a point, but let me back up a sec, because the morning with the chainsaw was only the start of the craziest HOA revenge story I'll ever have the privilege, or maybe the curse, to tell. Picture this. I'm standing in my kitchen clutching a mug of coffee, still half asleep, when the sound of power tools tears through the peace of a Tuesday. I look out and there's my HOA president, Karen, wearing safety goggles, just going to town on my fence, sawdust flying, perfume cutting through the smell of cut wood, like this was her idea of community service. And what's her excuse? It's a shortcut. It saves me time and I have important HOA business. Sure, Karen, important business at 7 a.m. wielding a chainsaw. She stands there like she's Mother Teresa, not a felon in yoga pants. I couldn't help myself. I smiled, whipped out my phone and started recording, because if you're going to act out in public, at least give the neighbors a good show. You know what I mean? Now, I know most folks would call the cops, but honestly, I wanted to see just how deep this rabbit hole went. Sometimes the best revenge is giving someone enough rope to hang themselves. So let's rewind and I'll show you how I ended up living next to a woman who thinks property destruction is a time-saving life hack. 6 months earlier, I was just Jake Morrison, recently divorced, looking for a fresh start for me and my 2 daughters, Emma and Sophie. We'd moved into Willowbrook Estates, one of those neighborhoods that promises community and family-friendly HOA management right there in the glossy brochures. What they don't tell you is that your version of community might involve running for cover when your neighbors decide to remodel your fence without asking. The house was perfect for us. 3 bedrooms, a real backyard, and the kind of quiet where you could hear the wind, not just your neighbor's late-night karaoke. I wanted stability for my girls, a place for tree forts and summer BBQs, after too many months of apartment living and tense custody exchanges in parking lots. Willowbrook looked like a Norman Rockwell painting come to life, cookie-cutter homes, retirees, waving hello, a couple of actual homemade cookie deliveries courtesy of the Hendersons next door. Honestly, everyone seemed normal. Well, almost everyone. Karen DeLuca, the self-appointed HOA queen, lived on the corner lot, drove an Escalade with vanity plates, and had been running the HOA like her personal fiefdom for years. Her husband was always on business, and Karen was infamous for sending out violation letters written in red ink for things like improper mailbox alignment and unauthorized garden gnomes. Her reign was so ironclad the other board member, Bryce, would have voted to ban oxygen if Karen asked nicely. She'd measure grass with a ruler, and kids whispered stories about her like she was the suburban boogeyman. So I spent that first 6 months renovating, mostly to keep busy when the girls weren't around, partly because the place needed love. My proudest project. A 6-foot cedar fence set a full 2 feet inside my property line. Call it my divorce lawyer special. I had the lot surveyed, all the permits, the works. But what I didn't know was that my fence blocked Karen's favorite shortcut to the mailbox, so now instead of cutting through my backyard, she had to walk the long way just like everyone else. 3 days after I finished, Karen shows up at my door, fake smile on, holding a plate of cookies that still had the price tag on the bottom. "Would you consider installing a gate for community access?" she says, like she's asking for a cup of sugar, not an open door to my privacy. I told her as nicely as I could. "No thanks. My daughter's safety comes first." She glitched like a malfunctioning robot, smile dropping as the gears jammed. 2 days later, a violation notice gets slapped on my front door. According to Karen, my fence violates Section 12.3b of the HOA bylaws, except when I check, that section doesn't even exist. She just made it up, figuring I'd pay the $200 fine to avoid the hassle. Thing is, my divorce taught me to check the fine print. People will always test you if they think you won't push back. Next move, Karen calls an emergency HOA board meeting, her Bryce and a third seat that's been empty for months. She holds it in her living room, candles lit, all the drama. Mrs. Henderson tells me about it in hushed tones by the mailbox like we're plotting an escape from Alcatraz. According to the minutes, my fence is suddenly a safety hazard that lowers property values. The whole thing stinks, but I've learned my lesson: document everything. I spent that Saturday at the county clerk's office going full detective, and wouldn't you know it, my fence is 100% legal. Karen's little board meeting violated the original 1994 covenant. She never gave the required notice. So I printed 47 flyers and slipped them into every mailbox except hers. Sometimes sunlight is the best disinfectant. Well, retaliation came fast. My work van got ticketed. Some inspectors showed up about unpermitted electrical work, and Karen started walking her poodle along my fence, letting it do its business as a not-so-subtle message. But then something interesting happened. Mrs. Henderson whispered that she got cited for her garden gnome, and the Rodriguez family across the street was suddenly told to get rid of their ethnic planters. Turns out Karen had been bullying half the neighborhood for years, and now people were finally comparing notes. Then came Chainsaw Tuesday. I wake up to that awful sound, look out the window, and see Karen, hair tied back, eyes wild, taking out a whole section of my fence. She's not even subtle, improvises hinges with my fence post to make her own shortcut. I step outside, phone rolling, and she declares I'm creating emergency access for community safety. You can build the HOA. I just keep filming, because what else can you do when reality turns into a sitcom? Police show up, and Karen immediately flips from destroyer to concerned citizen, claiming I threatened her. Luckily, the video says otherwise. That's when Marcus, her husband, pulls up in a fancy car. Turns out he's a lawyer with big county contracts. Suddenly, it's legal chess, not checkers. But Officer Martinez quietly pulls me aside. Press charges, or this only gets worse. So I do, and then I start digging into the HOA finances, and wow, the pattern is clear. Our dues had tripled, but services hadn't. Most of those fat contracts going to Marcus' firm. At the next HOA meeting, I show up, so to half the neighbors, and the energy is different. I play the chainsaw video, the room is silent, and then out of nowhere, Eleanor Matsushima, retired. Paralegal, lived here since day one, stands up and drops a folder thicker than a phone book on the table. She'd been quietly documenting Karen's illegal rulemaking for months. Turns out Karen's entire house was built on community green space land she never actually owned. That was the twist nobody saw coming. We had three options: nuke her with litigation and bankrupt the family, force her to buy the land, or work out a deal for a fair buyout. Let everyone move on. No more drama. The vote. Overwhelmingly, neighbors wanted justice, not revenge. We offered her the chance to buy the land for $180,000, use that money for real community improvements, and finally bring in professional HOA management. Karen responded like a cornered animal, filed lawsuits, called the news, accused us of conspiracy. But every time she pushed, her support shrank. Her own yes man, Bryce, finally grew a spine. And when she started harassing kids at the elementary school, approaching my daughters with weird questions, and candy parents stepped in, and the school banned her for good, that's when the feds showed up. Turns out, Karen's violations and discrimination crossed into federal civil rights territory. The FBI built their case. The county inspector found $75,000 of unpermitted renovations, and her financial house of cards collapsed. Karen was arrested. Perp walked out in handcuffs, while her family watched, the entire neighborhood watching in shocked silence. The trial was less satisfying than you'd think. Truth is, nobody really won. Karen got 18 months supervised release, had to pay back $127,000 and relocate. Our neighborhood got our land back, a big settlement fund, and more importantly, a second chance. The real victory: seeing the block transform, garden beds, playgrounds, cookouts, where people actually talk to each other. My daughters laughing again, neighbors looking out for each other instead of hiding behind hedges. I learned you don't beat a bully by becoming one yourself. You build something so good, so strong that the bully just can't touch it anymore. And you do it together as neighbors because when you finally compare notes, you realize you were never really alone. So let me ask you, what would you have done if your HOA president showed up with a chainsaw? Drop your story in the comments. Let's compare scars. Because if there's one thing I know, it's that these HOA nightmares are everywhere. And sometimes the best weapon you've got is your voice and maybe a little help from your neighbors.